She fears him. Not because he's cruel, not because he's rich, not because he's charming, but because she can't figure him out. She throws shade, he blinks, she disappears, he doesn't chase, she tests, he doesn't react. He's emotionally intelligent, she doesn't know how to break that. She doesn't know how to bend that. She doesn't know how to own that. So she fears him, because he's the one man she can't control, and that's why she never forgets him. This video is not for boys. It's for men who've been walked on, ghosted, betrayed, and left wondering why doing everything right still got them left. If you've ever felt like no matter how kind you were, how much you gave, or how hard you loved, it still wasn't enough, this is your wake-up call. Because what women say they want and what their emotions respond to are often two completely different things. They say they want a good man, but they chase a strong one. They say they want honesty, but they test your reactions to lies. They say they want connection, but they push it away the moment they feel overwhelmed by it. This video will teach you how to stop playing their game and start playing yours. How to stop reacting and start responding. How to stop being the man she can manipulate and become the one she fears losing. Before we go deeper, comment this below if you're ready to be that man. She can't move me. Number 1. He doesn't play emotional games. He doesn't play emotional games because he understands the cost. They don't just waste time, they erode dignity, and no man who truly values himself trades his peace for confusion. He watches how she moves, not to analyze her every breath, but to understand the language beneath her words, because he's learned that women rarely speak with clarity when emotions are high. They communicate through patterns, shifts, tests. And while most men run to solve, defend, or decode, he stays still, not out of passivity, but power. When she withdraws affection and gives him cold replies out of nowhere, he doesn't assume it's about him, and he doesn't chase to fix it. Instead, he stays in his frame and continues with what was already important: his gym session, his business call, his discipline. He doesn't lash out, asking why she's acting different. He simply gives her space to reveal who she is. And if she circles back with warmth, he accepts it without throwing it in her face. If she keeps playing hot and cold, he disengages, not as punishment, but because inconsistency is not the environment where a grounded man thrives. He's seen this before: the emotional ping-pong, the sudden storms, the affectionate highs followed by disappearing acts, and he no longer responds like a man seeking love. He responds like a man who already has self-respect. Have you ever experienced a moment where you did everything right, only for her to get even colder? That's because she wasn't testing your actions. She was testing your emotional center. If she can move you with mood swings, she owns the dynamic. But when you stay grounded, when you continue to speak slowly, to act with precision, to leave things unsaid instead of over-explaining, she starts to wonder who exactly you are. That mystery, born not from manipulation but from calm, becomes more attractive than any compliment. He's not withdrawn emotionally, he's composed. He can look her in the eye when she's pushing buttons and still say, "I'll let you feel what you need to feel. I'm here when we're ready to talk like adults." Not out of superiority, but out of a belief that real connection doesn't survive in chaos. She may storm off, she may accuse him of being too calm, but deep down, she feels something unfamiliar: safety. Because she knows that if she screamed, cried, accused him of things he didn't do, he wouldn't respond with panic or fire. He'd respond with, "I hear you. Take the time you need." This is the man who doesn't demand validation mid-argument. He waits until clarity returns, or he walks. And when he walks, she realizes something critical. She didn't just lose someone who listened. She lost the one person who never needed to dominate her, yet held the power the whole time. In today's world, most men are reactive. They match her tone, raise their voice, say things they regret. He doesn't. He chooses presence over pressure. He has nothing to prove in an argument, because he knows that the moment you start proving your point, you've already lost the deeper game. You're trying to win logic while losing power. What if instead you held frame? What if you sat down, looked her in the eye and calmly said, "I won't shout, I won't argue. Let me know when you're ready to talk to me like I matter." You'd be shocked how fast the chaos quiets. Not because you silenced her, but because you showed her the difference between a man and a boy. And yes, some women won't like this. Some will accuse you of being emotionally unavailable, but this is the price of clarity. The moment you stop playing games, the people who only know how to communicate through chaos will either evolve to meet you or exit. Either way, you win, because the emotionally intelligent man doesn't fear loss. He fears losing himself to someone who was never ready for his depth. Ask yourself, have you ever been in a relationship where every time you gained ground, she pulled away? That wasn't always because you did something wrong. It was often because she wanted to see if you would start doubting yourself. When you overcorrect, you lose leverage. When you hold your center, you reveal truth. Imagine you're dating someone and she starts withdrawing. She says she's just been busy, but you feel the change. Most guys would text more, ask what's wrong, start assuming they're being replaced. But you instead decide to double down on what you were already doing: training, reading, working. You don't send passive-aggressive messages. You don't throw in the "we need to talk" card. You wait. Not forever, but long enough to see if this is a phase or a pattern. And when she finally circles back, testing to see if you've been sitting in misery, you reply like you never lost sleep. Not cold, not fake, but calm. This is where the real shift happens. She realizes her behavior didn't dictate your reality. That's where fear starts. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're free. A woman can sense when a man's emotions orbit her approval. When they don't, her entire control strategy fails. And yes, some won't stay. But ask yourself, why would you want a relationship where the game is always about making you chase your own worth? You don't want a partner who needs to keep you off balance to feel secure. You want one who respects how you lead emotionally. Emotional intelligence isn't weakness, it's warriorship. You've trained your mind not to be hijacked by drama. You've trained your voice to respond without aggression. You've trained your energy to remain steady in storms. This is why she can't win emotional games with you, because you're not even at the table anymore. You've built a new one, and only those who value peace are allowed to sit. The old version of you might have begged for closure, argued for hours, let your heart race with every text. This version of you, you breathe. You ask yourself, does this align? And if not, you distance without bitterness, without theatrical exits. You just go. And if she asks why you didn't fight harder, you tell her this: because I don't believe love should require war. Now she's left with the realization that all her emotional tests failed, not because you ignored her, but because you refused to abandon yourself to keep her engaged. That's what terrifies her, and that's what frees you, because the emotionally intelligent man doesn't fear her tests. He just doesn't need to pass them to know his value. He's already passed the hardest test, leading himself. Number 2, his validation comes from within. He doesn't seek her approval because he's not trying to be chosen. He already chose himself long before she arrived, and that's the quiet force she doesn't know how to control, because most men walk into relationships with one hand extended, begging for confirmation that they're good enough, while the emotionally intelligent man walks in with both hands at his side, aware that nothing outside him defines him, And everything inside him determines how he shows up, how he loves, how he leads, and how he leaves if respect is ever broken. And this power makes women uncomfortable, not because he's arrogant, but because he's whole. And in a world where most people are addicted to external validation, wholeness is a language they never learn to speak. Think about this. How many times have you been in a conversation, a date, or even a relationship where you felt yourself shrinking just to keep her impressed, where you laughed at jokes that weren't funny, agreed with opinions you didn't respect, just to keep the peace or keep her interested? And every time you did, you lost a piece of yourself, and maybe it felt small in the moment, a smirk here, a nod there, but over time it added up, and one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back because you spent so long shaping yourself into something you thought she'd like that. You forgot what it meant to like yourself first. And that's the crack in the armor that women sense, the smell of need, the hunger for praise that replaces real presence. And when a man walks into a room needing nothing, not her compliment, not her attention, not her approval, he becomes a force she can't quite process because her entire system is used to men who orbit around her mood. Now picture this. You're on a date, and she makes a subtle comment about your ambition. Says something like, "You seem like you work a lot. Don't you think that's unhealthy?" And most men would fumble, try to justify, explain their dreams in a way that sounds less threatening. Maybe say, "Well, yeah, but I also try to balance, you know." But you don't play that game. You lean in and say, "My work is my mission, and I don't apologize for it." And then go back to your meal like nothing happened, because you didn't come to impress. You came to be honest, and she might smile, she might push more, she might even call you cocky. But deep down, she felt something different. A man who stands on what he believes, not someone who molds to her expectations. This is rare, and rare triggers both curiosity and fear. The truth is, people often don't know what to do with someone who isn't waiting for permission to exist fully. She can test you with her attitude. She can withdraw warmth to see if you chase. She can praise you one day and go cold the next. But you don't adjust who you are to win her back, because your self-worth isn't tied to whether she texts first, smiles more, or praises your masculinity. You're not negotiating your identity based on emotional weather. You are the weather. And that kind of energy, it's intoxicating, but it requires deep internal clarity, the kind that doesn't flinch when she pulls away, doesn't get high when she compliments, doesn't spiral when she's upset. Because the emotionally intelligent man is rooted in a code, not a mood. And when a man has a code, he can be alone and still feel full. He can be doubted and still feel clear. He can be misunderstood and still speak softly. And this confuses people who only feel real when they're being liked. The world teaches you to adapt, to say the right thing to get attention, to suppress your opinions to be more agreeable. And if you follow that script long enough, you'll find yourself surrounded by people who like you for reasons that have nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with who you pretended to be to feel wanted. But what happens when you stop pretending? What happens when you walk into a room and don't scan for validation? When you speak your truth even if it's unpopular? When you hold eye contact without needing to dominate or submit, just to connect? You start seeing who's really drawn to you, not the mask. You start attracting from your center, not your performance. And that's when the game changes. She starts realizing she can't shame you into changing. She can't bait you into defending. She can't compliment you into compliance. Because you've already done the work, the internal work, the mirror at midnight, face your fears, own your shadows kind of work. And that kind of man doesn't come around often. Think back to the last time you felt unworthy because someone didn't return your energy. Did you ask yourself why their reaction held so much power? Was it because you hadn't fully chosen yourself yet? Most men never ask that question because they've been taught to chase, to earn love, to do more to keep her interested, and every time they do, they give away another inch of their soul. But not you, not anymore. You've learned that chasing validation creates relationships built on compliance, not connection. You've learned that a woman can't respect a man who doesn't respect himself first. You've learned that when you own your truth, fully, unapologetically, you lose people, but you gain peace. And that peace, that's priceless. It's the kind of peace that allows you to say no without guilt, to walk away without regret, to end conversations that no longer grow you, to decline invitations that don't align with your values, to stand firm when she tests you, not because she's evil, but because testing is how some people measure the strength of a man's foundation. And your foundation is unshakable. You don't seek to be understood. You seek to be aligned. You're not here to explain your worth. You're here to embody it. That's why when she criticizes your pace, your purpose, or your past, you don't get defensive. You say, "That's your opinion," and let her sit with it. You don't correct her. You don't argue. You don't flinch. Because her misunderstanding doesn't reduce your clarity. That's the difference. Most men fold at the first sign of feminine disapproval. You stay grounded. And this calm confidence builds a reputation that precedes you. People start describing you differently. They say you're different, hard to read, deep, intense, and they're not wrong. You've become a man who isn't easily moved, and that makes you magnetic. But none of this happens overnight. It happens when you commit to knowing yourself so deeply that no amount of praise inflates you, and no amount of criticism diminishes you. It happens when you stop needing someone to tell you you're enough and start acting like you already are. This is the mindset that creates attraction, not just in women, but in life. Jobs, friendships, opportunities, they come to those who lead themselves. So the next time she says something to test your edge, don't react. Let it land, let it echo, then move like it didn't shake you, because it didn't. And if it did, go work on that in private. Build a man so solid that when love arrives, it adds, not completes. That's the kind of man she never forgets. Not the one who did the most, the one who needed the least, the one who stayed himself through her tests, the one who didn't shift with the tide, the one who could say no with love, yes with clarity, and goodbye with grace. That's you now. And from this moment forward, you never need to ask if you're enough again. You simply show up as you are and let the world adjust. Number 3, he sees her but doesn't need her. He sees her clearly, not through the lens of fantasy or desperation, but through grounded perception sharpened by experience. The kind of perception that isn't clouded by desire or distorted by emotional chaos, because he's lived long enough to understand that wanting someone deeply is not the same as needing them, and needing them is often the first step toward becoming someone. You're not just to keep them close, but the emotionally intelligent man walks a different path. He doesn't need her energy to complete his, her affection to validate his day, or her presence to stabilize his purpose, because he has already built a world that stands on its own, a reality so rooted in discipline, vision, and clarity that when she enters it, she is not the reason for its strength. She is simply a welcomed addition, not the source. And this is where the tension begins for her, because most men need her to feel like men, need her mood to determine their worth, need her admiration to breathe deeply, and she is used to being the one who decides how high or low a man feels. But when she meets a man who feels deeply and still doesn't chase, who understands her triggers but doesn't cater to them, who sees the games but refuses to engage, she doesn't know how to win. And that's when fear creeps in. Not because he's cruel or cold, but because he's unreadable in the best way possible. Because every time she pushes, he doesn't pull, and every time she withdraws, he doesn't collapse into neediness. and every time she tries to create drama to feel alive. He grounds the moment with calm that doesn't ask for her to change, but also doesn't lower itself to match chaos. And if you've ever found yourself changing your tone, your posture, your presence just to keep a woman engaged, you know what it feels like to live on the edge of your own identity, waiting for her next move before you decide yours. But that ends the moment you start seeing her as she is, not as who you wish she would be, not as the fantasy you built in your mind, but as a human being with wounds, emotions, and triggers that are not your responsibility to solve. And from that place, everything shifts, because now you're observing instead of absorbing, you're understanding instead of rescuing, you're connected without being consumed, and it shows in how you respond to her when she's moody for no clear reason, when she withdraws mid-conversation, when she accuses without basis, not with sarcasm, not with escalation, but with a quiet, steady tone that says, "I'm here, but I won't engage this until you're ready to speak with clarity." And while she may storm off in frustration, part of her feels exposed, because for the first time she's met a man who doesn't need to fix her to feel strong, doesn't need to save her to feel significant, doesn't need to win the argument to feel dominant. And this emotional detachment, not from her, but from needing a specific outcome, makes him dangerous in the most attractive way possible, because women don't fear love, they fear losing control within love. And the man who gives without strings, who listens without surrendering his center, who walks away without drama if disrespected, becomes unforgettable, because he's not just a partner. He's a mirror, one that reflects not who she pretends to be, but who she truly is. And that's why she simultaneously wants to be around him and runs from him, because she knows he can see her. And when someone sees you without judgment, without agenda, and without trying to mold you into something easier to handle, you feel both safe and raw. And very few people can hold that level of emotional tension, but he does. Not because he's heartless, but because he's done the inner work to be okay, regardless of how she feels about him. And this emotional posture is not passive, it's powerful, because he's removed the bait, the need for approval, the craving for affirmation, and in doing so he becomes the one thing that can't be manipulated. A man who stands in front of her fully aware of her beauty, her brilliance, and her unpredictability, and still chooses not to chase, not to fold, not to abandon himself in the process of loving her. And this creates a dynamic so rare, so emotionally disciplined, that it either elevates her to match his level or forces her to confront how much of her love is based on control rather than connection. And most men won't understand this unless they've lived through the kind of emotional heartbreak that forces a man to stop seeking and start seeing, to stop craving partnership and start becoming someone who is whole with or without it. And once you reach this level, you stop needing her to say the right thing. You stop needing the relationship to work out to feel worthy. You stop needing her mood to validate your masculinity, because you've developed emotional independence, the kind that makes you dangerous to people who rely on emotional chaos to create bonds. And she senses that. She feels your stillness, your depth, your ability to sit in discomfort without rushing to resolve it. And in that moment she is both challenged and awakened, because she's never had to rise to meet a man before, only watched men fall to keep her. And that is what shifts the entire relationship dynamic from emotional tug-of-war to mutual presence, where you no longer bend to gain affection, but also don't withhold love to protect your ego. You simply exist fully, unapologetically, and let her choose whether or not she's ready for that level of relating. And if she isn't, you don't shame her. You let her go, because love without readiness is not love. It's obligation wrapped in emotional volatility, and you are no longer available for that version of connection. And so you become the man who can sit with her pain without absorbing it, who can witness her patterns without being pulled into them, who can love her fully without ever needing her to love him back in order to feel valuable. And this is the essence of emotional intelligence in its most powerful form. Not detachment from emotion, but mastery of it. And the man who lives from this place no longer asks, "What do I need to do to keep her?" But rather, "Is this relationship a place where I can continue becoming more of who I truly am?" And if the answer is no, he walks, not with bitterness, not with games, but with clarity, because he knows that love is not proven by how much you tolerate, but by how deeply you stay connected to yourself, even in the presence of someone else's storm. And if she grows with you, great. If she doesn't, you still win, because the ultimate victory is never in keeping someone else, it's in never losing yourself again. Number 4, he can leave without regret. He can leave without regret because he doesn't tie his identity to who stays or who goes. He ties it to how honestly he showed up, how clearly he communicated, and how deeply he remained aligned with what mattered most, which means his strength doesn't lie in his ability to hold on longer than everyone else. It lies in his ability to know when something no longer serves growth, connection, or self-respect, and walk away without burning it down or looking back with bitterness. And this kind of detachment isn't born from arrogance or avoidance, but from a lifetime of losses that taught him that no amount of begging can make someone ready, no amount of effort can replace compatibility, and no amount of waiting can create alignment where none exists. Because the emotionally intelligent man knows that the longer you hold on to something that confuses your soul, the more you delay the peace that's already waiting on the other side of letting go. And if you've ever stayed too long, hoping she'd change, hoping things would feel like they did in the beginning, hoping your loyalty would convince her to meet you in the middle, you know that painful clarity that eventually arrives, the moment when you realize love cannot be negotiated with consistency alone. And when you finally walk, it's not because you stopped caring, it's because you started respecting yourself again, and that's where the power lives, in the space between "I wish this worked" and "I refuse to beg anymore," in the decision to close the door, not out of punishment, but out of protection for your peace. And this is where most men break, not because they're weak, but because they've been taught that walking away means failure. When in truth, sometimes it's the most masculine act you can make. Not to ghost, not to vanish, but to calmly say, "This no longer fits who I'm becoming," and step away with dignity, even if your heart's still invested, even if she begs you to stay, but never chooses to grow, even if the memory of her touch still lingers in your sleep, because the emotionally intelligent man doesn't confuse history with destiny, and that clarity gives him a kind of emotional posture that most people find terrifying. He can love you deeply and still leave you entirely, and that's not cold, that's precise, because he understands that if you have to lose yourself to keep her, you've already lost the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with your own soul. And think about how many relationships you've seen or lived where staying felt noble, but was actually self-betrayal, where you kept giving after your boundaries were broken, kept showing up after being disrespected, kept forgiving things that slowly chipped away at your self-worth. And they told you that's what love looks like. But real love never requires that kind of bleeding to prove it's real. Real love challenges you, yes, but it doesn't confuse you. It doesn't have you constantly guessing where you stand. And when a man finally realizes this, he stops asking, "What can I do to fix this?" and starts asking, "Is this still good for both of us?" And if the answer is no, he doesn't try to argue his way back into her heart. He lets her go, not because he stopped loving her, but because love isn't enough without mutual respect, shared vision, and emotional safety. And this clarity makes him rare in a world full of men chasing closure they'll never get, writing long messages that only lead to longer fights, waiting on texts that will never come, trying to decode silence that means nothing more than disinterest wrapped in manipulation. But the emotionally intelligent man no longer plays that game. He doesn't chase clarity from someone who had every chance to give it. He doesn't beg for peace from someone who thrives in confusion. He doesn't wage war for the attention of someone who already surrendered their care, because he knows that if he has to fight to be seen, he's in the wrong arena, and so he exits. Not loud, not with slamming doors, but with footsteps that echo his evolution, and she'll feel it. Not because he said something dramatic, but because he didn't. Because he left with nothing but peace. And that peace is deafening to someone who expected a fight, who wanted him to break down, to cry, to collapse into regret. But instead, he gave her calm detachment, and nothing cuts deeper than a goodbye spoken from grounded self-worth. And this is the moment she realizes the gravity of what she lost. Not because he threatened her, not because he insulted her, but because he simply walked away from what no longer made him feel alive. And men, if you've ever felt afraid to walk away because you didn't want to be seen as weak or heartless, understand this. Weakness is staying in something that kills. Your soul slowly, strength is having the courage to say enough and move in the direction of truth. And that kind of decision rewrites your entire story, because now you're no longer a man waiting to be chosen. You're a man choosing himself every time peace costs too much to keep someone else comfortable. And this shift changes everything. Not just your relationships, but your entire life. Because now you build standards that honor your worth. You build relationships based on clarity, not confusion. You speak from a place of knowing, not needing. And you move from a place of alignment, not avoidance. And the woman who meets you in this energy will feel the difference instantly. She'll feel that your love is not tethered to her mood, your presence is not dependent on her approval, your loyalty is not for sale at the cost of your identity. And if she's not ready for that, you won't try to convince her, you won't lower your vibration to match her fear, you won't shrink so she can feel bigger. You'll let her go and trust that the right connection will never require you to be less than what you've become. And that's the man she fears, the one who can love her fully and still leave completely, because his loyalty was never about codependence, it was about alignment. And if the connection stops serving the growth of both people, he steps back, not to punish but to preserve what he built within himself long before she ever came into his life. And the emotionally intelligent man knows that nothing real is lost when you walk in truth, because even if it hurts, even if you miss her, even if the memories ache late at night, you left with your head high, your heart clear, and your soul intact. And there's no regret in that. Only freedom, the kind of freedom that turns men into legends and stories into lessons. The kind of freedom that reminds every man watching this right now that walking away isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. I'm putting together the most powerful step-by-step relationship guide ever created for men, built entirely on timeless Stoic principles that have stood the test of centuries. This is the blueprint for how to reclaim your power, command respect, and create unshakable relationships without losing yourself in the process. It will show you exactly how to embody emotional intelligence at the highest level, where peace becomes your weapon, detachment your strength, and clarity your compass. If you're ready to become the man she can't manipulate, the man the world respects, and the man you respect, stay tuned. This ebook is coming soon, and it will change the way you navigate love, leadership, and life itself. Drop a comment. Blueprint, if you want me to personally send it to you the moment it drops. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and hit that notification bell, because what's coming next will redefine your entire future.